Hey people, hi. We're talking about spiritual warfare. We're talking about dealing with the antics of Satan. We've spoken a bit about that this last week or so. But I want to wrap it up by finishing off what I started yesterday. We were talking about the why we sin, not just because Satan tempts us, but because we are sinful by nature. We are born with a sinful, tragically sinful nature. And the only way to deal with a sinful nature is to kill it, and that is to put it to death. And the legitimate sacrifice that Romans tells us to make is to offer ourselves as an offering to God, as a sacrificial offering. And the only good offering is a dead one. While that offering is still alive, kicking and running around on the altar, trying to get off the altar of sacrifice, it's of no use and no significance to God, and use to anybody for that matter at all. A dead sacrifice is the only legitimate one that God will accept. So we understand our responsibility in this whole desiring of knowing God better and walking with Him, and basically a lifestyle of spiritual warfare. It's a lifestyle. It's a whole bunch of different choices. But the question today is, how do I know if I have died to self? Is there some kind of proof? I know if I die physically, there's proof, because nothing can happen to that body that body can do anything about. If I die and you kick me and you shout at me and you call me all sorts of names, you're not going to get any response from that body simply because it's dead. And I guess in a crazy way, isn't that true spiritually for us as well? When we die to self, the first thing that changes is our response to the world around us. The things that change about what people say about it, what people do to us. We as Christians are far too alive. We should be dead to ourselves. What people think about us, as long as God thinks we're okay, should not really matter what they think. It should only matter what God thinks about us. So even as believers, whatever people say, whatever people do, we can tell how dead we are simply by our response to the things that happen to us. In the world today, there are so many mean things that happen to us, and you can tell how dead you are to self and your own agenda and your own life by how you respond to those things. The temptation of the things around us will be seen so differently if we were dead to self. I wonder, Joseph did not know Jesus in the same sense as we do, but in an Old Testament way, he's a great version of someone who was dead to self. Whether he was the privileged son living in the best house with his little robe of many colors, or whether he was a slave in a slave's outfit, he did not change his attitude because he was dead to himself. He was only alive to what God wanted him to do, and whatever circumstances he was in, he would choose to simply be alive to God and dead to the things going around. Even when he became a slave, and became the steward of Potiphar. And Potiphar's wife, this beautiful woman, tried to seduce him. He knew what to do. He ran as fast as he could to get away from her, because he did not want to fall into the trap of sin, because he knew too well what his sinful nature was thinking. So he acted against everything that cried out inside of him. He acted against it, and his response was incredible. We look at how when he even became prime minister and he had the opportunity to be able to meet with his brothers, and instead of killing them, which he then had the power to do, he forgave them, and he gave them the best place in the land to be a farmer's son. He understood what it meant to be dead to himself. You could tell that by his responses to the sinful temptations that there were around him. Now, I know that Jesus was Jesus, and he's the Son of God. He's God himself. We all know that. But even Jesus is a beautiful picture of dying to himself. In the Garden of Gethsemane, he cries out to his Father in his humanness, is there another way? Could there be another way through this thing? That was his humanness crying out. And then he realized, no, there's only one way, and it's God's way. And he prayed, he said, Lord, your will be done, not mine. I'll do whatever you tell me to do. So his response was amazing. There he is hanging on the cross, and people are shouting at him. They've beaten him. They've put a crown of thorns on his head, and they're hanging upon the cross, and they're shouting abuse. And what does he say to them? He says, Father, forgive them. They don't know what they're doing. That's a response of somebody who's dead to himself. Before he was even dead physically, Jesus had died to his own ego, his own agenda. He could have called 10,000 angels out of heaven, wiped them all out, and gone back to heaven again. He could have done that. But in his humanness, he could have done that. But in his sovereignty and his godness, he had dealt with the issue of his self. And he was as human as each one of us. You can tell he had dealt with it by his response to the temptations that he was put under, and he proved himself to be true. Isn't that amazing? Wouldn't it be amazing if we could be that, if we could be more dead to the things that happen around us, if we could be more dead to the temptation of materialism and all those other things, if we could just be dead to ourselves, those things would be no challenge to us at all. The only reason they're a challenge is because we're not dead. And therefore, death to our own ego, our own desire, will put to rest our sinful nature. I'm not saying, as I said yesterday, it's a once-off event. It's an everyday occurrence. But you know what's cool? Is that the longer you do it and the more intensely you do it, the easier it becomes. Hope that makes sense to you today. Have a fantastic day, and we'll be back again tomorrow. Bye-bye.